Everyone, this is the Tripwire podcast, part of Triple Play Fantasy. I'm your host, Zach, at FF Triple Batman. Just a solo show tonight, so it's going to be quick. We are recording live right before Monday Night Football, so I will not have all the information that comes out Tuesday, but we want to get out the waiver wire information to you as fast as possible. So if you have not joined us before, this is the waiver wire show for Triple Play Fantasy. The main show is on Tuesday nights, typically at 6:30. So go ahead, make sure you like this video on YouTube, subscribe to the Triple Play Fantasy channel so you don't miss any of the great content the guys are putting out. We're talking football, baseball, basketball. We got it all. The team is great over there, so I don't want you to miss out on that. And if you're listening to us on the podcast feed, make sure you rate, review, subscribe, follow, all that fun stuff. It's a great way to support our team. All right. So we're going to kick it off with week 13 waiver wire. Can't believe we're already here. It is the final stretch of the regular season for fantasy football. So the week 13 buys, we went from no buys in week 12. It was a Thanksgiving treat. Now we have two bye week teams. We have the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. But it is very important to look ahead to week 14, which for most people is your last week of the regular season before you go into the playoffs. We have the Atlanta Falcons, Chicago Bears, Green Bay Packers, Indianapolis Colts, New Orleans Saints, and the Washington Commanders. That is 6 teams with a lot of fantasy starters amongst those teams. So make sure you plan now as you're getting ready for your waivers. Make sure your roster is ready to go because you probably have to win week 14 to either secure a spot in the playoffs or maybe lock up a bye week. All very important. So as always, the players I'm going to talk about are all rostered on less than 50% of ESPN rosters. I know that doesn't apply to every league, so I'm trying to cover as many different rostership percentages as I can, but I'm trying to be as general as possible to help out as many people. But you can always reach out to us on our Twitter feed. It is at the Tripwire Pod if you have any questions you'd like us to answer about your specific league. So with that, we're going to get started on quarterbacks. So, not gonna lie, waivers this week are probably the worst I've seen this entire season. I normally find at least a handful of gems every week, and I'm like, no, I can make this work. It's pretty rough for this week 13. So, number one, I have Jimmy Garoppolo, 49% rostered, just coming under that threshold. Number two is Deshaun Watson at 43.1% rostered. Number three, Jared Goff, 29% rostered. Number four, Matt Ryan, who has not played yet at the time of this recording, 8% rostered. And number five, Mike White, 3% rostered. So I want to start with Jimmy G. We've been talking about him for a few weeks. Really, it just comes down to he's got a lot of great matchups to end the season. So 4 out of the 5 his next games are considered positive QB matchups, including all 3 in the fantasy playoffs. He's got a lot of great fantasy weapons, even though a lot of them are banged up right now. It's a dynamic offense. So we've seen him score 1 touchdown, be very pedestrian. He's got a decent floor. He's very just vanilla. To a couple weeks ago, he put up 4 touchdowns. So Jimmy G just gives you some decent base, not a lot of upside. And then I'm going to talk about Deshaun Watson. So we've been talking about him for a few weeks as we've seen his rostership percentage boost up a lot as we now get closer to him coming back. He will be the starter in week 13. If you don't want to roster Watson for your own personal reasons, that is 100% okay. I'm not telling you have to roster Watson. If you're okay roster him, then I would roster him if I have the space, no matter where I'm at from a playoff standpoint, just because we have no idea what he's going to look like. Honestly, he could be terrible. He looked awful in preseason. He hasn't played meaningful football in almost 2 years now. So all bets are off. We don't know how he's going to play. But if I'm a playoff contender, I'm already in the playoffs. I would hate to see somebody that's a lower seed pick him up and then use him against me in like week 15 or 16 or even 17 and knock me out of the playoffs because Watson ends up getting hot at the end of the season when I could have just stashed him on my bench, almost like you're just playing defense against your league. So something to think about. And none of these quarterbacks are that inspiring. I would not be blowing a ton of fab unless you're desperate for a quarterback. And at this point, if you have fab in week 13, then spend whatever you feel comfortable. You should know your league market at this point for QB prices. On to running backs. So this normally has at least 1 or 2 guys that I like to talk about. It's a struggle this week. So we're going to start with number 1, Alexander Madison. 23.5% rostered. Number 2, why am I struggling with his name? TDP, Davis Price with the 49ers rookie. He is less than a percent rostered. Number 3, Kyron Williams at 19% rostered. Number 4, Darrell Henderson Jr. at 37% rostered. And number 5, Jerick McKinnon at 30% rostered. None of these guys are going to help you at all this week. I wouldn't start any of them. I put Madison number 1 just because he should be way higher rostered at this point. If you are the Dalvin Cook manager, and even if you're not, stash Madison. If Cook gets hurt, which could happen at any time, we don't wish injuries upon anybody, but it can happen, then he automatically shoots up to a RB1, borderline RB2, like high-end RB2. So just put them on your roster. The rest of these guys are all, you're waiting to see how things shake out. Injuries are ahead of them. We don't know who's going to play ahead of them. That's all they are. So don't go crazy on Fab. Let's quickly move on to wide receiver. Let's not waste our time with the running backs. We have number 1, Treylon Burks at 37.5% rostered. Number 2, Darius Slayton at 37% rostered. Number 3, Zay Jones at 31% rostered. Number 4, Mac Hollins, 12.5% rostered. And number 5, Elijah Moore at 33% rostered. So I wanted to talk about a few of these wide receivers. Treylon Burks, we've been talking about for a couple of weeks. He had his first touchdown in week 12. That's very exciting. It's because he recovered a fumble in the end zone after Derrick Henry ran for 70 yards. But hey, it still counts, or it should in most of your leagues. And if it doesn't, get that fixed. So he tied the team high with 6 targets. There was 3 players with 6 targets, but hey, at least he was up there. And over the last 2 games, he has 181 yards. So he's being used a lot more. He seems to be healthier. He is one of those rookies that he's just a physical freak that he has a chance to just take an easy slant and take it to the house. So he's one of those upside guys stashed on your bench. You might need him in week 14 with all those buys. And then I wanted to highlight Zay Jones, who's coming off a great game. So in week 12, he had a 37% target share, which is incredible. And that led to 11 catches for 145 yards. So over his last 2 games, he has 19 catches on 24 targets for 213 yards, and he gets to play the Lions in week 13. So he's one of those guys you could pick up this week and play him for week 13 in that great matchup. He might be my favorite if you need a wide receiver for week 13 to pick up and play immediately. And then Mac Hollins, so he's been playing pretty well as the wide receiver 2 on that team. So Adams, as we know, is the obvious wide receiver 1, dominates the targets. But with the games that Renfro has been out, so there's 5 of them for Hollins, he's averaging 11.2 fantasy points per game, and that's from 7 targets per game and an 18.2% target share. So that is not bad that you can get that off the waiver wire right now. Like I said, he's only 12.5% rostered in ESPN leagues, so he should be available in a lot of leagues. And then Elijah Moore, man, we were so excited for him coming in this year, and it has not gone well. He had his best fantasy game of the season, which is kind of scary to say that since he only had 2 catches, but he turned that was from 2 targets, and it was for 64 yards and a touchdown. The concerning part is he only ran the 5th most routes on the Jets last week, but why I'm mentioning him as my 5th ranked wide receiver is because his next 4 games are good matchups. So he's at the Vikings, at the Bills, and then versus the Lions and versus the Jaguars. So maybe Mike White will stay the QB and he can start throwing more to Elijah Moore. So he's one of those stash candidates for you. All right, moving on to tight ends. We are flying today because, like I said, it is not an inspiring waiver wire, but we're here to get you ready for it. So number 1 is Taysom Hill at just under 37% rostered. Number 2, Tyler Conklin, 32% rostered. Number 3, Foster Moreau, 35% rostered. Number 4, Hunter Henry, just under 25% rostered. And number 5, Evan Ingram, 36% rostered. All right, I do not like any of these tight ends, honestly. If I have to start one, though, the only one that I would really want to pick up is Taysom Hill, just for his potential upside. He did play a season-high 47% snaps last week, week 12. That's very exciting. And he's just one of those players that they manufacture so many touches for him, potentially, depending on how the game flow goes or wherever the game plan is for that week. That offense is anemic right now, so maybe Taysom Hill can give them more of a spark. He's the only one on this list that I would actually put any money down in Fab to pick up, and it wouldn't be a lot. The rest of these guys you can probably get for free or wait for waivers to run, and hopefully you're not relying on a tight end. But let's be honest, most teams in your league are struggling at tight end. So if that's the only weakness on your roster, you're probably making the playoffs and you're doing okay. And we're going to finish up with the DST stream of the week. I got 2 for you guys this week, depending on how you're feeling. So I got the Cleveland Browns because they are going to the Houston Texans. They're only 9.3% rostered. They are not that good of a defense this year, but they do have Myles Garrett, and they are playing the Houston Texans. And the Houston Texans have been a great matchup for any team when it comes to a DST. So go ahead and grab those Cleveland Browns. And if you're really not feeling the Browns, then I suggest the Seattle Seahawks because they are playing the Los Angeles Rams. It is in LA, but I'm gonna feel like it's gonna be like a Seahawks home game, just the way that team is and the way those fans travel. They're only 11% rostered. The Rams are awful. They do not have any offensive weapons anymore. They don't have an offensive line. The Seattle Seahawks aren't even that great of a defense, but they should feast on the Rams. And now, normally we do talk about droppable players. Anybody that's over 50% rostered. Honestly, at this point in the season, you should have a good idea who you need to drop. If you are desperate to pick up somebody, whoever's at the end of your bench, if they don't give you any upside, if you're just holding them because you're hoping something might happen, if you're desperate for the playoffs, drop them. I mean, you can't be locked onto a player. And if you are in playoff contention or you already are going to make the playoffs, start looking ahead. Pick up an extra QB, pick up an extra DST, play that game, prepare now. It's only week 13. The playoffs are coming real quick. So if you get ahead of it, you're going to get these guys for free or very cheap compared to when everyone is talking about them in the next couple weeks. So think ahead, be prepared for your playoffs. We want to see you win. So good luck out there. Like I said, if you are not following this team already, make sure you follow us at the Tripwire Pod on Twitter. Make sure you are subscribing to the Triple Play Fantasy YouTube channel. Just go ahead and click that button right here. And hope you all have a great one. Enjoy Monday Night Football. And good luck in Week 13. And good luck with those waiver wires. Have a good one, everybody.